Today we have two different products to cover, and we're going to talk about TRYX Panorama 360 Addressable RGB AAO and TRYX LUCA L70 case, which looks impressive. Both actually look impressive. Let's be honest. Panorama view, when we're talking about the AAO screen, which hasn't been done so far, and the visual aspect when we're talking about the screen, when we're talking about the resolution, is quite appealing. I'm really digging the whole visual aspect of it. Let's start with the AAO. Okay, so TRYX Panorama, right? And it looks outstanding without a doubt. You have two versions. You have the non-RGB, which actually doesn't have addressable RGB fans on top, and the one that I have right here with 3120 addressable RGB fans that have proprietary cable that needs to be connected specifically to a proprietary extension that eventually splits to 4-pin PWM and 3-pin addressable RGB 5 volts, which has a splitter so you can add more addressable RGB stuff on it. The interesting thing is, and what actually surprised me, that all these fans that you see right here, so we have 3 on the side that I had to reverse because these aren't reverse blade unlike others that I reviewed. Then we have 3 on top, 1 here and 1 at the bottom. That's 8 fans daisy chained to 1 addressable RGB header, and they all work properly. So when you take that into consideration, only that's a bit strange in a positive way, because usually you get flickering, usually 1, 2, 3, 4 fans don't work or something similar to that. So having 8 fans connected directly to addressable RGB header on your motherboard that works is outstanding. Now with the AAO, of course, you get a hub, but that hub doesn't literally have to do anything with this AAO, and the reason is quite straightforward. The hub actually has 2 PWM headers and 2 addressable RGB headers, and it has SATA, 2 SATA ports going out that you need to connect directly to your power supply, plus you have additional cable that is connected to USB 2.0, addressable RGB, PWM, and basically that doesn't make sense because this right here, this scenario is connected directly to motherboard, everything. Now the curved AMOLED display is connected directly to your motherboard with USB 2.0. And that is the only cable that actually runs from that segment, except for the PWM header that needs to power on and that you need to, well, that you can adjust the speeds of the pump. That's it. But the connection is different now, because what happens here? The AMOLED display actually has a chip that is connected to the pump block top, and with the USB 2.0 you have the option to control the speed of the pump. You have the option to control the speed of the VRM fan, because you have a VRM fan when you remove the AMOLED display. So that's an additional thing. So it's really cool. The tubes, and what I noticed, need to go from the bottom part of the AAO. There is no other solution, because you would be flipping the screen in various positions, either on top, left, bottom, and then it looks completely different. You do need to take that into consideration. One thing that I noticed is, is quite straightforward. When you take the AAO out of the box, what happens is that the fans are already pre-installed to the radiator, which is always a positive thing, because you don't have to screw 12 screws into the radiator through the fans. But in this scenario, if you decide to place it on top, all the cables from the AAO are here on the front. And that means that if you want to push the cables at the back, you need to put the tubes right here in this position, which comes to a certain point where it's either touching the tempered glass or is touching the GPU. So what you need to do is untie those 12 screws, rotate the fans, not rotate them to get reverse airflow, but rotate them in terms of getting the cables back. That's it. When you do that, you're basically done. That's it. When we're talking about the visual aspect of the screen and the possibilities, because you have a couple of presets in their software regarding the AAO, which gives you an option to just use the presets, adjust up to 3 sensors, or basically you can go with GPU temperature, CPU temperature, and time and date, which actually look quite nice, and they're nicely placed. Some presets are a bit too bright, but then again you can adjust the color of the font with black and white, so you can adjust depending on the backside, what you're gonna do, and quite straightforward. The tubes are quite flexible and I don't have to go into that. But what I need to say are the specs. So it supports up to LJ1700, which also covers up now 1851, as well as the MD AM4 and AM5. You do need to read the manual when placing it, because there are specific thumb screws that lock the pump block top on the CPU, because they're a bit different even for AM4 and AM5. But regardless of that, it's really straightforward, because first of all, you don't have to apply thermal paste. It's already pre-applied, even though you get an additional thermal paste inside the box. And when we're talking about placement, it's getting interesting, because everybody's taking now from Lee and Lee the actual mounting mechanism. So you remove the original retention brackets from the AM5 motherboard, you place their retention brackets, and use the screws from the original motherboard, from the original retention brackets of the motherboard. And after that, you get a, let's say, Intel shape-like positioning of the AIO, well, pump block top on the CPU. Basically, it does easen up the process, because they don't have to use two different brackets for AMD or for Intel. It's the same. So that's really good. Now, when we're talking about dimensions and some specifications, radiator dimensions are 399.5 times 120 times 30. We have an aluminum radiator with a tube length of 400 millimeters. Pump dimensions are 115.5 times 92 times 92, and the pump speed goes from 800 to 2600. Now the pump noise is 25.3 decibels at maximum, and of course 4-pin PWM for connection when we're talking about controlling power and everything else. We have fluid dynamic bearing, and for the fans, the actual name of the fans, we're having Rota Pro at the non-RGB and Rota ARGB for the ARGB model that I have right here. We have 500 to 1850 RPMs, 66.09 CFM for the airflow, 1.8 millimeters H2O air pressure, 27.86 decibels fan noise. And basically, apart from the flipping of the fans, the installation is quite simple. And what you have to do is basically remove the pump block top, the AMOLED display, to get the access to the thumb screws, which is a good thing, because it covers those thumb screws, those locking nuts, and gives you a clean design when you place the AIO. Now, of course, there are two cables running, as I stated, the USB 2.0 and PWM. You need to figure out how to hide those cables, and that's it. Now, in their software, as I said, you have a couple of presets that you could choose from, and or even you can customize. But then you can also go with CPU temperature, GPU temperature, CPU voltage, GPU voltage, CPU load, GPU load, usage, date, time, and add up to 3 sensors or indications here on the side, which is quite solid, I do have to say. Nice looking, subtly placed, and everything is quite cool. One thing I would like to suggest when you're going with this AIO, and if you're going with this AIO, remove the addressable RGB RAMs, because what happens? Addressable RGB RAMs, of course, light up, and depending on the color and everything, it really doesn't matter. But they are visible. If you look at this point, they are visible right here on the AMOLED display part. So this is why this is the first time I switched from addressable RGB to non-RGB, so it can have a clear view of the AMOLED display. Now, of course, you can adjust the VRM fan, but let's be honest, when you pump it up to 100%, it's louder than anything in your PC. But at 50%, VRM fan is tolerable. Then when we go with 40% VRM fan, it's great. It's quite solid, actually. But you can still hear it a bit. It's nothing drastical, but for some of you guys, it will be irritating if there's any sound coming out. So I just have to mention that. But just 5% lower, so at 35%, the VRM fan is silent. So just to give you heads up, you can adjust the fan speed and you can do whatever you want. You can set it up as a fan curve, or you can fix it completely, no matter what, no matter the temperature on the CPU, you can do actually what you want. Now for the TRYX LUCA L70, this case is interesting and it has loads of stuff going on here. I mean, I like the design, I like the visual aspect of the case because it is different, but you have parts that are totally unnecessary. And when I'm saying totally unnecessary, I'm saying that the case is coming stock with the power supply shroud or bracket or housing here at the top. If the power supply shroud is at the top, you can place two 120 fans at the top. But if it's here at the bottom, you can only place one 120. And then you're getting one fan intake from the bottom instead of two. Just because you have this huge part right here, which is most likely some sort of a hub or possibility to reroute the cables from the 4 USB to USB Type-C, 3.5mm jack, and of course the power on button. Since I mentioned the power on button, it's first of all, I didn't even notice where it was because I was pressing everywhere and there's no actual indication that it's power on. You don't have any logo or whatever, but I did press it at first and it didn't turn on. It's nothing drastic, you just have to press it a bit harder, which, just to give you an idea. So let's just go one by one. If you go a bit higher, you get to the tempered glass, and it has TRYX logo right in the middle on the front, which is straightforward, okay? So this front tempered glass is held only by the side hinges and one peg. That's quite solid, and I don't want to add anything to that because the peg in this scenario is holding quite solid. But then we have this bottom part, which actually doesn't have any magnetic pull, it doesn't have anything connected here, and you basically, if you push the tempered glass on front, it actually can move and it doesn't have any fixture. So that's, in my opinion, that's a bit of a problem because you never know who will push it harder or not, or what will happen. It does have some sort of a protection there, but it still can move forward inside the case and can't actually be completely fixed. But it's a cool thing that you could just open it on the side and there's that. Now the side tempered glass has two pegs holding it solidly. When I removed the foil from the tempered glass didn't fall, so these two pegs hold it perfectly fine, and I don't have anything else to say because you have three parts right here that are from the tempered glass sliding inside, so this is holding the bottom part. One more thing when we're talking about the power supply shroud. So you have this magnetic cover, which if you want to have visible power supply, you can remove it. Has nice design, let's put it this way, so it's not boring, just open. And then if you don't want to do that, you place this, even though we're having this, right? So yeah, that's another thing. But the cool thing about this power supply shroud, or the bracket, or whatever you want to call it, is that you don't have to tie up 8 screws all together, because you do have a bracket that attaches at the back of the power supply. But usually you have to have either 6 or 8 screws to manage this. You're going with 4 screws, 4 thumb screws, because 2 are going diagonally in the power supply and 2 are going diagonally in the chassis, holding it quite well. I'm moving the whole table, so kind of makes perfect sense that it's fixed. Now the case comes without any fans, so there's no possibility to buy a separated case that actually has pre-installed fans. And when the power supply shroud bracket is at the top, we're having this and this. Now this right here is the bottom bracket, and now you're wondering, how did I fix the fan here at the bottom? Well, it has another bracket which is fixed to the case, and it has a dust filter. And luckily, from this side, when you place the tempered glass, this part isn't closed off, so that's good. But the whole bottom part here, when you take these two axes, is blocking air from the inner part, and the back side is fully closed to the bottom. So the only intake is here, a bit of a bit part here for the power supply, this one and that one, eventually the front. So it kind of has, I would say, 75% of a fan to pick up air from the bottom to the inner part of the chassis. This is a cool thing, don't get me wrong. This is a cool thing to be able to remove it from the chassis, place the fans, place it back in, you're done. There's literally nothing to do extra more than that. But then there's no need for additional bracket here because you're just creating additional blockage for the airflow. GPU can be placed like such, and you don't have any vertical mount to rotate GPU, but it comes with a quite nice GPU anti-sag bracket that is held by one thumb screw, has a canal where you just push it upwards and downwards, is fairly long so you could actually adjust where you want to place it, and it has a rubber part at the top so it doesn't damage the GPU, and you can adjust it really straightforward. This is quite solid. I have nothing else to add to it, so yeah. So since I'm mentioning brackets and fans and everything all together, let's go with the possibility of the radiators and fans all together. And first, let's go with the top PSU placement. So if it's placed on top, at the top you have a possibility to place two 120 or two 140 or maximum 240mm radiator. On the side, we have maximum 420mm radiator or three 140 or three 120 fans. At the bottom, we have a possibility, in that case, three 120 or three 140, and at the rear, one 120mm fan. As we go and push the power supply at the bottom, at the top you have a possibility to go with three 120 or three 140mm fans with the maximum of 420 radiator. On the side, the same configuration, nothing changes there. 120 at the rear, and confirmation that you can place either 120 or 140mm fan. Now for the front I/O panel, we have one 3.5mm jack, 4-pole for microphone and speaker. Then we have one USB-C 3.2 generation 2x2 60 watts PD, interesting. And for USB Type-A 3.2 generation 1. Now for some clearances, we have maximum CPU cooler height 170mm maximum. Then we have cable management space at the back 63mm. It supports up to E80X motherboard with a maximum of 280mm. We have 7 expansion slots, power supply up to 190mm, and then we have maximum GPU support at 460mm, and storage up to two 3.5-inch hard drives or 9 times 2.5-inch SSDs. Now, at the back, when we go and check it out, there's quite a lot of stuff going on, because what's happening at the back, you open this panel that is basically toolless. Everything is toolless here. You don't have to use your screwdriver, because even from the factory, these thumb screws are quite easy to remove, and that's quite solid. Usually when you get a thumb screw, it actually isn't a thumb screw. You have to use a screwdriver. But you just remove this side panel, and then you have two panels. One is hiding the, let's say, the middle part right here where the 24-pin cable is running, and the other one is hiding the back plate, or the back plate of the CPU, and kind of has some additional space for cable management. Because first of all, this case supports back connect, and that means you need to have a bit of a space extra than regular cases, MIDI tower or whatever, that have only 2 centimeters. You can't bend the cables that much or something similar to that. So this is really cool, because you have an option in those panels, so that open up, you have the possibility to mount all of those SSDs, which is quite solid. It might be tricky with cable management, because it's really kind of, you do have to fiddle around a bit, but that's quite solid. There is a thumb screw holding the right panel that is also movable, but then again, thumb screw that is actual thumb screw, and not just, I have a thumb screw, it's called thumb screw, but you have to use a screwdriver for other cases. It's completely different story, so that's solid. And then we go with the top panel. Now the top panel is also quite easily removable, because it's magnetically attached. So it actually covers the whole top part, almost the whole top part, except for these side parts. They did some sort of a handle at the top, which really does look cool. And you're actually pulling the case out of the box with that handle, because after all, you do need to push it upwards, because it's not your regular box. So with that handle, you're pulling out the case from the box, but it has a quite nice meaning. So what it says on the top, we have TRYX sample Luca, collection date 2024, Proxima Centauri B mining log, and then you have some sentences with some crossed off words. It kind of looks like we're having a scenario from, I don't know, Secret Service that hides certain words that shouldn't be visible. And before we go into a conclusion, let's check out the benchmark. So, AIDA64 Extreme Edition, 83 degrees on AMD Ryzen 9 7900X3D with 4825 MHz clock speed. And I'm rocking here the PNY Accelerate GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Super OC Virto Epic X with 57 degrees, which is quite solid in this scenario. And then we go to Cinebench. Now, it's not a surprise, but still, it's always positive to see good, solid performing. It started at 81 and it ended at 79 degrees on the CPU, which is quite outstanding because usually it either goes up or it just stays fixed. In this scenario, it went down. Clock speed from 5000, depending on which test it was, to 5025, which is again quite solid. And then we start at 26,360 Cinebench points. The maximum that it reached was 26,455, and the last one was 26,428. Average was 26,360, 70, something like that. And that's quite solid. I have to admit that's quite solid, but let's go to the price comparison. The TRYX Panorama 360 addressable RGB with 6.5-inch AMOLED curved display is at $349.99, while the TRYX Panorama 240 AAO with 6.5 AMOLED curved with performance fans, not the addressable RGB ones, is $299.99. But when we go with the case, it's $250 and no fans. We're having no fans with the case. And but actually everything else is quite solid, I do have to say, because you're swapping panels here. Okay, not a problem, without a doubt. The quality here is quite solid, and I didn't have literally any issues when we're talking about, let's say, damages, final finish on the product, dents, or anything similar to that. Really, the case is totally fine, perfect shape. I'm just sad that I don't see additional 120 fan here at the bottom because it has that kind of capsule or compartment for those cables for the I/O ports and the TRYX logo. It could be good, but all in all, what I could say, 250 might be a bit over the board. 199 just to go beneath that psychological border of 200. Just 199 would be ideal for this case, when we take everything into consideration, and the modularity, of course, because you can swap things around. And this panel right here is just clapping too much. I would definitely leave it out or make it something that is more fixated when you place it, even though it has a magnet. But then, see, just doesn't collide with the whole case. But I'm digging the top handle, I'm digging the visual aspect, I'm digging everything that is here inside this case. Oh yeah, and the opening here at the bottom, but it's raised by 4 centimeters. So I'm just going against myself what I stated at the beginning. It's still quite solid that it takes up the air with 4 centimeters. We're usually having much smaller cases with 2 centimeters, but they collect air from each side, right? Here it can still pick up the air because there is a distance between the legs and the compartment holding and the panel holding the fans. So yeah, just this in that scenario is a bit unnecessary, but okay. Great case, nice visual aspects, nice design, and for the AAO, PC Crazy Creative badge, without a doubt. PC Crazy Creative badge for TRYX, Panorama, 360, addressable RGB, or whatever, any of those, because I'm really digging the AAO AMOLED display. I'm really digging the whole approach on it, and it's really, really appealing design, visual aspect, whatever you want to get. Creative badge, without a doubt. So guys, yeah, performance is there, everything is there. That's it, guys. The links are in the description below, so you can check out the prices. Well, you know the prices, but you can check out some additional information, or if you want to actually combine this into your future setup. And that'll be all for today, guys. Thanks for sticking by. I know it was a bit longer video, but I really wanted to cover every single segment, and we're having 2 products actually in one go, so there's that. So yeah, If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, click the notification bell. See you next time, guys. Bye bye.